The crystal champagne flute felt cold in my hand as I looked around Carlton Bolton's opulent living room. Laughter and chatter filled the air, blending with the soft jazz playing in the background. I took a sip, the bubbles dancing on my tongue as I tried to calm the uneasy feeling in my stomach. "Raymond, darling, there you are." Shelley's voice cut through the background noise as she approached me. Her red dress hugged her curves. She put a manicured hand on my arm. Her touch is light yet possessive. "I have been looking everywhere for you." I forced a smile, simply getting some air. "Dear, it's quite crowded in here." Shelley curved her lips into a pout. "You aren't trying to hide, are you? This is a big night for us. Carlton has been asking about you." "I am not hiding," I said, maintaining an even tone. "I only needed a moment." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but her smile remained unchanged. "So, come along. We should mingle." Shelley led me through the crowd of guests, and I couldn't help but feel like a prized show dog being paraded. I nodded and smiled at familiar faces, exchanging greetings with co-workers and their partners. Shelley was in her element, her laughter resonating as she enchanted everyone around her. Raymond. "There's my star analyst," Carlton exclaimed, clapping me on the shoulder. His face was flushed, most likely due to the expensive scotch in his hand. "I'm glad you could make it. How are you enjoying the party?" "It's fantastic, sir," I responded, putting on my best corporate smile. "Thank you for inviting us." Carlton waved his hand dismissively. "Nonsense. You are now family. Raymond, your work has been outstanding this quarter. I've got big plans for you." Shelley, my boy, beamed as he squeezed my arm. "Isn't that wonderful news, darling?" I nodded, feeling the weight of expectation rest on my shoulders. "I appreciate the opportunity, sir. I will continue to do my best for the company." Carlton launched into a story about his most recent golf outing. I let my gaze wander around the room. That's when I noticed her. She stood near the fireplace, conversing with a small group. Her emerald green gown was elegant yet understated, a stark contrast to the flashy outfits around her. What drew my attention, however, was her genuine and warm smile, which reached her eyes in ways I hadn't seen in years. "Raymond," Shelley's voice snapped me back into the present. "Carlton asked you a question." I blinked and returned my attention to my boss. "I apologize, sir. Could you repeat that?" Carlton chuckled. "Don't worry, my boy. I was just asking about the Henderson account. How is that coming along?" I gave a brief overview of the project. "I'm grateful for the distraction." As I spoke, I couldn't help but look back at the woman by the fireplace. Our eyes locked for a brief moment, and I felt a surge of electricity run through me. "Excuse me." As I was finishing up my explanation, a soft voice interrupted. I turned to see the woman from the fireplace standing next to us. I apologize for interrupting, but I couldn't help overhearing. "Are you discussing the Henderson merger?" Carlton's eyes lit up. "Indeed we are. Raymond is in charge of conducting the financial analysis. And you're Elizabeth Chambers," she said, holding out her hand. "I'm part of the legal team working on the merger. It's a pleasure to meet everyone." As we shook hands, a warm sensation spread through me. "Raymond Norton." I spoke, my voice more steady than I expected. "It's wonderful to finally put a face to the name. Your efforts on the contract have been invaluable." Elizabeth smiled, and I was captivated by the intelligence in her eyes. "Thank you. I have also been impressed by your financial projections. I was hoping we could talk about a few points that I was curious about. If you have a moment, I can respond." Shelley's arm wrapped around my waist. "I'm sure Raymond would be delighted to arrange a meeting during working hours." She spoke in a sweet tone with an underlying edge. "We wouldn't want to bore everyone at a party with sharp words, would we?" I felt a tinge of annoyance at Shelley's interruption, but my expression remained neutral. "Actually, if you do not mind, I would be happy to discuss it right now." "Carlton, could you please excuse us for a moment?" Carlton waved us off, already engaged in conversation with another guest. I led Elizabeth to a quieter corner of the room, conscious of Shelley's gaze following us. "I apologize for my wife." I spoke softly as we found a spot near a window. "She can be a little protective." Liz shook her head. Her smile indicated understanding. "There's no need to apologize. I appreciate you taking the time to speak. I've been reviewing the numbers for the technology division, and as we discussed the merger's complexities, I became concerned about the projected growth rates." I relaxed for the first time that evening. Elizabeth's insights were sharp, and her questions thoughtful. We discussed ideas back and forth. We're losing track of time as we work through potential scenarios. I must say, it's refreshing to work with someone who truly understands the complexities of these transactions, I said, leaning against the window frame. Most people's eyes glaze over when I mention market projections and risk assessments. Elizabeth laughed, her tone warm and genuine. I could make the same claim about contract law. It's nice to have a conversation without having to dumb it down. Our gazes met, and the party noise faded away for a brief moment. I felt a connection that I hadn't had in years, not just intellectual, but something deeper and more profound. Shelley broke the spell with her voice, sharp and cutting. "Raymond, darling, I think it's time we went home. I am feeling a little tired." I turned to find my wife standing behind us. Her smile was tight, and her eyes were cold. "Of course, dearest," I said, straightening up Elizabeth. "It was a pleasure. I'll send you an email about scheduling a proper meeting to discuss those projections further." Elizabeth nodded as her professional mask slid back into place. "Absolutely. It was nice to meet you both. Enjoy the remainder of your evening." As we approached the coat check, I could feel the tension radiating from Shelley. She remained silent until we got in the car. The privacy screen is up between us and the driver. "Well, you certainly appear to be enjoying yourself," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I don't think I've ever seen you so excited at a party." I kept my eyes on the road ahead. "We were discussing work, Shelley. It's crucial for the merger." She scoffed. "Please, I noticed the way you looked at her. Do you think I am blind?" "You are being ridiculous," I said, my jaw clenched. "Elizabeth is a colleague. There's nothing more." Shelley turned to me, her eyes flashing. "Raymond, just remember who got you where you are now. Remember what is important." As we rode home in silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The facade of our perfect life was starting to crack, and I wasn't sure I wanted to patch it up this time. The next few weeks were a blur of work and awkward silences at home. I threw myself into the Henderson merger, using it as an excuse to avoid confronting Shelley about our growing tension. Our interactions had devolved into a carefully choreographed dance of polite small talk while avoiding any genuine conversation. I first heard the whispers in the office late at night. I was about to go to the break room for another cup of coffee when I overheard two junior analysts talking by the water cooler. "Have you seen Mrs. Norton at the charity gala last week?" One of them spoke in a low, conspiratorial tone. "She was all over Brandon Evans. I thought her husband was about to explode." I froze my hand on the doorknob. The other analyst chuckled. "Please, everyone knows she's been joking around for years. Norton is either blind or does not care." Their laughter faded as they walked away, leaving me standing there with my mind racing. I'd heard rumors before, but I dismissed them as office gossip. The seed of doubt that had been planted at Carlton's party began to germinate over the next few days. I found myself paying more attention to Shelley. I noticed how she guarded her phone and the quiet conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. The pieces were beginning to fit together, and I didn't like the picture they were creating. It was time for some answers. Luther McIntosh investigates. On the third ring, a gruff voice answered. I took a deep breath, bracing myself. "Mr. McIntosh, this is Raymond Norton. I am in need of your services." There was a pause at the other end of the line. "What kind of services are we discussing, Mr. Norton? I need you to follow my wife." I spoke the words, which tasted bitter in my mouth. "I believe she may be involved with someone else." Luther's voice softened slightly. "I see. Why don't you visit my office tomorrow morning? We can go over the details in person the next day." I sat across from Luther in his cramped office. The smell of stale coffee and cigarettes lingered in the air. He was a stocky man with a troubled look on his face, but his eyes were gentle as he listened to my suspicions. "I'll need some basic information," Luther explained, taking out a notepad. "Your wife schedules any patterns you notice, as well as the names of people you are concerned about. The more I have to work with, the faster I can respond to your questions." I nodded and swallowed hard. "There is one name in particular, Brandon Evans. He's a businessman known for using aggressive tactics. I've seen them together at events, and there has been conversation." Luther wrote down the information. His expression is neutral. "Okay, Mr. Norton. I'll get started right away. I should have some preliminary information for you within a few days." I left Luther's office feeling a mix of relief and dread. Part of me hoped I was mistaken and that this was all a misunderstanding, but deep down I knew the truth was about to crash down around me. My phone rang 3 days later just as I was leaving the office. "Mr. Norton, it's Luther. I believe you should come by. I have something you should see." My heart pounded as I approached the investigator's office. Luther greeted me at the door. "I apologize, Mr. Norton. I wish I had better news for you." He led me to his desk, where a laptop was open. "I've been following your wife for several days. She's met Brandon Evans at a downtown hotel. I have photographic and video evidence of their encounters." Luther played a video file and I watched in stunned silence as Shelley and Brandon hugged in the hotel lobby. Their kisses are passionate and familiar. My stomach churned as I watched them disappear into an elevator together. There is more. Luther spoke softly, handing me a file. Financial records and text messages. I was able to recover. It appears that this has been going on for at least a year, possibly longer. I flipped through the pages, each containing a new Blow credit card, statements displaying lavish gifts, intimate text messages discussing their rendezvous, and even plans for a weekend getaway. My vision blurred as the reality of the situation set in. "Mr. Norton, what do you want to do next?" Luther asked, his voice bringing me back to the present. I closed the file. "I want everything, every photograph, video, and scrap of evidence. I want to confront her tonight." Luther nodded with understanding in his eyes. "I'll put everything together for you. Just be careful, okay? These situations have the potential to escalate quickly." As I drove home that evening, the file of evidence weighing heavily on the passenger seat, I felt a storm of emotions brewing within me. Anger, betrayal, humiliation. They swirled together, instilling a determination I hadn't felt in years. Shelley had made a fool of me, but no longer. It was time to end the illusion of our perfect life once and for all. I pulled into our driveway, bracing myself for the upcoming confrontation. When I entered the house, it was quiet. The only sound was the click of Shelley's heels on the hardwood floor as she approached to greet me. "You arrived home late." She spoke in a casual tone, but with underlying tension. "A busy day at the office." I met her gaze. "My voice is steady. We need to talk. Shelley, now." Her eyes narrowed slightly as she followed me into the living room. I placed the file on the coffee table between us, watching as recognition and fear flashed across her face. "What is this?" she inquired, her tone barely above a whisper. I opened the file and spread out photographs of her and Brandon. "Why aren't you telling me? Better yet, why don't you tell me how long you've been cheating on me with Brandon Evans' help?" Shelley's innocent mask crumbled, giving way to a defiant expression. "How dare you follow me? What I do in my spare time is none of your concern." I laughed. The sound was harsh and bitter. "This is none of my business. You are my wife, Shelley. Or did you forget about it in between your brief encounters with Brandon?" She stood up, her eyes filled with rage. "Please don't be so arrogant, Raymond. You've been so preoccupied with your important work that you barely notice me anymore. What were you expecting me to do?" "I expected you to be loyal," I yelled, my composure finally slipping. "I expected you to keep our promises and communicate with me. If you were unhappy, don't sneak around like that." Shelley's hand landed on my cheek, the slap echoing throughout the room. "Don't call me that," she hissed. "Want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I have been sleeping with Brandon. And you know what? He makes me feel alive. He is exciting and passionate, everything you are not." I rubbed my cheek, my rage transforming into something stronger, more dangerous. "How long?" She shrugged. A cruel smile appeared on her lips. "Does it matter? A year? Perhaps more? Long enough to realize that Brandon is twice the man you will ever be, and I suppose all those business dinners, all those late nights at the office, those were just cover for your little affair?" I asked, my voice slow and controlled. Shelley laughed, the sound grating on my nerves. "Oh, Raymond, you're so naive. Did you really think I was interested in your boring financial talk? I was building connections, setting us up for a better life. Brandon understands ambition. He knows how to take what he wants." I stood up, towering over her. "And what exactly were you planning, Shelley? To leave me for him? Once you'd squeezed every last drop of status and money out of our marriage." She met my gaze, unflinching. "Maybe. Or maybe I would have kept you both after all. You've been so easy to fool all these years, always trusting, always believing the best in me. It's almost sad, really. Something snapped inside me at her words. In that moment, I saw Shelley for who she truly was, a manipulative, selfish creature who had been using me from the very beginning. All the love I had felt for her turned to ash, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "Well, I'm afraid your little plan has come to an end," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I want you out of this house tonight. You'll be hearing from my lawyer in the morning." Shelley's eyes widened, the first hint of fear creeping into her expression. "You cannot be serious. Everything we've built, you're just going to throw it all away." I laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "No, Shelley. You threw it all away the moment you decided to betray me. I'm just taking out the trash." She took a step towards me, her hand reaching out. "Raymond, please, we can work this out. I'll end things with Brandon, I promise. We can go to counseling, start over." I caught her wrist before she could touch me, my grip firm. "Save your lies for someone who still believes them. We're finished. Shelley, pack your belongings and get out." As I watched her rush upstairs, tears breaking through her composed facade, I felt strangely calm. "Wash over me." Shelley's sobs faded as she moved upstairs. I stood in the living room, surrounded by evidence of her betrayal, feeling a strange combination of emptiness and determination. The life we'd built together was crumbling, but I refused to be buried beneath the rubble. I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. "Terrence? It's Ray. I need your help." "Ray, what's happening?" "You raise your voice." Terrence's concerned voice rang through the line. "Shelley has been cheating on me with Brandon Evans," I said with a steady voice. "I am kicking her out tonight." "Can you come over?" Terrence replied after a brief pause, his tone hardening. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't do anything stupid until I get there." Terrence arrived promptly, as promised. As I let him in, his face was full of concern and anger. Shelley could still be heard moving around upstairs, her muffled sobs punctuated by the occasional third of a suitcase. "Jesus, Ray," Terrence commented, taking in the scattered photos on the coffee table. "How long has it been going on?" I shake my head, pouring us both a generous serving of scotch. "At least 1 year, possibly longer. I have been such a fool." "Terrence." Terrence grabbed my shoulder, his grip firm. "You are not the fool here, Ray. She's the one who gave up a good man for that snake, Evans." We sat silently for a moment. The reality of the situation has settled over us. Terrence finally spoke up, his voice low but determined. "What is your plan? You know I have your back. Whatever you need." I drank a long sip of scotch. I can feel the burn in my throat. "First, I'm getting her out of the house. Then I will destroy them both. They want to play games, fine. Let's see how they like it when I start playing for real." Terrence nodded with a smile on his face. "That is the Ray I know. We'll make them regret having crossed you." The sound of heels on the stairs interrupted our conversation. Shelley appeared. Mascara streaked down her face as she pulled 2 large suitcases behind her. "I hope you're happy, Raymond." She spit. Her eyes blazed with rage and hurt. Years of marriage are being thrown away over one minor indiscretion. I faced her with cold determination. "A minor indiscretion. Is that what you've called another man for over a year? Save your excuses, Shelley. They mean nothing to me anymore." Shelley's gaze shifted to Terrence and her lip curled in disgust. "I see you've already called the cavalry. Raymond, are you always hiding behind your friends?" Terrence stepped forward, his voice low. "If I were you, Shelley, I'd watch your mouth. You aren't in a position to throw stones right now." I raised my hand to stop Terrence. "It is not worth it. She isn't worth it." I turned back to Shelley, my voice emotionless. "Your belongings will be sent to wherever you end up. I recommend that you leave now before I decide to air our dirty laundry to everyone we know." I caught a glimpse of fear in Shelley's eyes. Then her indifferent mask slipped back into place. "This is not over, Raymond. You're going to regret this." The door slammed behind her. Terrence clapped my back and I felt a weight lift off of my shoulders. His voice was filled with satisfaction. "Good riddance. Now let's talk about how we're going to make them pay." The following few weeks were a blur of legal meetings and sleepless nights. I immersed myself in my work, using it as a shield against the pitying stares and whispered gossip that seemed to follow me everywhere. The news of Shelley's affair and our impending divorce had spread like wildfire among our social circle, and I found myself withdrawing more and more. One particularly exhausting day at the office. I was hunched over my desk, poring over financial reports, when I heard a soft knock on the door. My concentration. "Mr. Norton?" Elizabeth's voice sounded hesitant. "I apologize for disturbing you, but I wanted to see if you had time to discuss the Henderson merger. Details." I looked up, feeling guilty about the concern in her eyes. I had been avoiding her since the night of the party. I'm unsure how to navigate our budding friendship in the aftermath of my personal crisis. "Of course, Elizabeth," I replied, gesturing toward the chair across from me. "Please come inside." As she settled into her seat, I couldn't help but notice the stark difference between her genuine warmth and Shelley's calculated charm. Elizabeth's presence appeared to alleviate some of the heaviness that had settled over me in recent weeks. I heard what happened. Elizabeth spoke softly, her eyes meeting mine. "I'm very sorry, Raymond. If there is anything I can do." I shook my head and forced a smile. "Thank you, but I am fine. It is better this way." "Really? What did you want to talk about with regard to the merger?" Elizabeth hesitated for a moment before nodding and pulling out a file as we discussed the details of the deal. I felt some of the tension leave my body here in the world of numbers and projections. I was on solid ground. My phone began to buzz loudly, interrupting our conversation. I clenched my jaw as Terrence's name appeared on the screen. "I apologize. I need to take this." I said this while standing up. "Terrence, what is going on?" Terrence's voice was tight with rage. "Ray, get down to the country club right now." "What? Why? What's happening?" I asked as I reached for my jacket. "It's Shelley and Brandon." Terrence spit. "They're here to make a scene. Brandon is talking about how he is going to take over your accounts and how you are done in this town." "It is bad, Ray." I felt a chilling fury wash over me. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Do not let them leave. I'm going to hang up." I turned to Elizabeth, who was looking at me with concern. "I am sorry, but I have to leave. I've got a situation to handle." Elizabeth stood. Her expression was determined. "Allow me to join you. You should not have to face this alone." For a moment I hesitated, remembering Shelley's harsh words about my reliance on others. I nodded. "All right, but I warn you, it won't be pretty." The drive to the country club was tense, with Elizabeth's quiet support and my own roiling emotions as we arrived in the parking lot. I noticed a small crowd gathered near the entrance, stepping out of the car. I straightened my tie and breathed deeply. "Ready?" I asked Elizabeth. She nodded, her demeanor calming. "Just behind you." As we approached, Brandon's voice sounded loud and mocking. Then there was poor Raymond. He had no idea. He is quite the financial genius. He is unable to see what is going on right in front of him. As we approached, the crowd parted. Whispers and stares followed in our wake. Shelley was the first to see us, her eyes widen in surprise, then narrow in defiance. "Well, well," she drawled, her voice tinged with false sweetness. "Look who has decided to attend the party. Hello, darling." "And who is this?" "Your new plaything." I felt Elizabeth stiffen beside me, but I concentrated on Shelley and Brandon. "I believe you've had enough to drink, Shelley. Why don't you and your friend call it a night?" Brandon stepped forward, his chest puffed up like a peacock. "Or what? Norton? You're going to cry to Daddy Carlton about this. Face it, you are done in this town. Your wife and your clients. They are all coming to me right now." I laughed, but the sound was cold and devoid of humor. "Is that what you think, Brandon? Have you won? Allow me to tell you something." I moved closer. "You have no idea what you have started. By the time I'm done with you, you'll be lucky to find a job flipping burgers." Brandon's face flushed with anger. "Are you threatening me, Norton?" "A big mistake. It's not a threat," I explained. My calm demeanor was in stark contrast to his blustering. "This is a promise. Enjoy your brief victory lap while you can, because from now on, your life will be a living hell." I turned to the stunned onlookers, my voice echoing throughout the suddenly silent crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this unseemly display. I assure you that it will not happen again. Now, if you will excuse me, I have more important things to do than entertain these people." I offered Elizabeth my arm and turned to leave. As we walked away, I could hear the crowd's murmur, stunned whispers, and particularly stiff glances. "Raymond," Elizabeth spoke softly as we approached the car. "Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, feeling the end of my restraint crumble. No, I'm not okay, but I will be. They want war. I'll give them a war that they'll never forget. As we drove away from the country club, leaving Shelley and Brandon to deal with the fallout from their spectacle, I felt a newfound resolve wash over me. The time for playing nice had passed. From now on, I would fight fire with fire. The morning following the country club incident, I sat in my home office, surrounded by files and laptops. The events of the last few weeks had left me raw, but that pain was quickly crystallizing into something more intense, focused. As I sipped my coffee, a knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come inside," I called, knowing exactly who it would be. Terrence came in, followed by two people I didn't recognize, a wiry man with sharp eyes and a woman whose fingers never stopped moving over her phone. "Ray," Terrence said, his voice firm with determination. "I would like you to meet Luther McIntosh and Susan Shawn. They are here to help us, even the odds." I stood and extended my hand to each of them in turn. "Luther, Susan, thank you for coming. Terrence has filled you in on the situation." Luther nodded, his gravelly voice reflecting his rough appearance. "He has to say, Mr. Norton, you've created quite a mess here, but I have dealt with worse. We will get you what you need." Susan eventually looked up from her phone, her eyes gleaming with predatory intelligence. "I've already started looking into Evan's digital footprint. Let's just say he's not as cautious as he believes he is." I motioned for them all to sit. "Good, because what I have in mind will require all of our abilities. Shelley and Brandon believe they've won because they humiliated me and can simply walk away. I plan to show them how wrong they are." Terrence leaned forwards, his expression intense. "What is your plan, Ray? Whatever it is, I am in." I took out a file and spread photographs and documents across the desk. "First, we go after Brandon's business. Luther, I need you to dig deeper into his previous transactions and clients. Anything we can use. Susan, I'd like you to focus on his digital presence. Emails, financial records, and anything else that may be considered illegal." Luther nodded, already taking notes. "I have contacts in the business world who owe me favors. I'll start there." Susan's fingers flew over the phone. "I can get his emails before the end of the day. Financial records may take a little longer, but not much." I turned to Terrence. "I need you to be my eyes and ears in the office. Brandon has been attempting to poach my clients. I want to know every decision he makes and every meeting he attends." Terrence's jaw is set in determination. "Consider it finished. That snake cannot sneeze without our knowledge." As we got deeper into the plan, I felt a surge of energy that I hadn't felt in years. This was not just about vengeance. It was about justice, about showing Shelley and Brandon that their actions had consequences. We spent 6 hours refining our strategy. Each person brings a unique skill to the table. As the sun started to set, casting long shadows throughout the room, I stood up and stretched out the kinks in my back. "All right, team," I said, my voice full of satisfaction. "Let us get to work." Brandon Evans will not know what hit him. Over the next few weeks, our plan began to take form. Luther's investigations unearthed a web of shady deals and disgruntled former partners, all ripe for exploitation. Susan's hacking skills were invaluable, providing us with a trove of incriminating emails and financial records. One evening, as I was going over the most recent batch of information, my phone vibrated with a text from Terrence. "Tomorrow I'll be meeting with Harrington Corporation. Evans believes he has it in the bag. It's time to make our move." I smiled, full of anticipation. "Do it," I texted back. "Let us see how Brandon handles a little competition." The next day, I walked into the Harrington Corp offices, exuding a sense of calm confidence that I did not fully feel. As I approached the receptionist, I noticed Brandon exiting the conference room, his face flushed with what I assumed was an early victory. Our gazes met, and I noticed a flicker of uncertainty on his face. I gave him a knowing smile before turning to the receptionist, Raymond Norton, to ask for Mr. Harrington. I spoke smoothly. "I believe he is expecting me." Brandon's voice, tinged with barely contained rage, emerged from behind me. "Norton? What the hell are you doing here?" I turned, raising an eyebrow. "Business. Brandon, you understand how that works, right? Or do you want me to explain it to you?" Before he could reply, Mr. Harrington emerged from the conference room. "Raymond, right on time. Come in. We have a lot to talk about." As I followed Mr. Harrington into the room, I couldn't help but throw one last barb over my shoulder. Brandon, better luck next time. Perhaps try not to start with promises you can't keep. The door closed behind us. What about cutting off? Brandon sputtered. Protests. Mr. Harrington settled into his chair and fixed me with a sharp gaze. I must say, Raymond, your timing is impeccable. He spoke with a hint of amusement in his voice. Mr. Evans was just here making some rather lofty claims about his ability to manage our account. I leaned forward, my voice full of quiet confidence. Mr. Harrington, I'm not here to make grandiose promises or overestimate my abilities. What I can offer you is a proven track record of success, a thorough understanding of your industry, and a dedication to transparency that I believe Mr. Evans lacks. For the next hour, we delved into the details of the Harrington account. I outlined my strategy, supporting each point with solid data and realistic projections. Mr. Harrington's eyes were filled with determination as we shook hands at the end of the meeting. Well, Raymond, he said, a smile spreading across the corners of his mouth. I think we have a deal. I'm looking forward to working with you. I left the Harrington offices. I noticed Brandon pacing in the lobby. His face was a mask of barely controlled rage. Our gazes met, and I witnessed the moment he realized what had happened. This isn't over, Norton, he hissed as I passed by. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I paused and turned to face him fully. Oh, Brandon, I think I do. The question is, do you? Because from where I stand, you're the one who's in over your head with that. I walked away, leaving Brandon to stew in his defeat while I got into my car. I gave myself a moment of satisfaction. This was only the beginning, but I could already feel the balance of power shifting. Susan sent me a text message. You'll want to see this. Evan's emails are a goldmine. How soon can we meet? I smiled, feeling a rush of excitement on my way. I texted back. The next phase of our plan was about to begin, and I couldn't wait to see Brandon's reaction when he realized how deep a hole he had dug for himself. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity with each passing day. We tightened the noose around Brandon and Shelley's necks, gradually dismantling the life they believed they had secured. Susan's technological expertise proved invaluable as we began to investigate Brandon's digital life. Late at night, I huddled around my home office desk. Susan's eyes glowed with pride as she turned her laptop to face us. Look at this, she said, pointing to a collection of emails. Brandon has been cooking the books for years. He's been inflating his company's profits to entice investors and secure loans. I leaned in, a slow smile forming on my face. This is perfect, Luther. Can you verify these figures? Luther nodded, already jotting down notes. Give me 1 or 2 days. I'll check with my contacts in the banking industry. If this works out, we'll have him by the balls. Terrence clapped my shoulder. What are our next steps, Ray? My mind cleared up, racing with possibilities. We leaked this information to the appropriate individuals. Not all at once, however. We will start with whispers. Plant the seeds of doubt in his investors' minds. Susan's fingers flew over the keyboard. I can create a few anonymous accounts, start spreading rumors in financial forums. It will seem like insider information. Good. I nodded. Luther, once you've verified the figures, contact your SEC representative. Do not give them everything, just enough to begin an investigation. Luther grinned with a predatory gleam in his eyes. They've been eager to nail Evans for years. This will start a fire under them. We fine-tuned our plan. I couldn't help but feel a rush of pleasure. Brandon had believed he could take everything from me, but he was about to learn a hard lesson about consequences. Over the next few weeks, our plan played out with devastating precision. Financial irregularities were whispered about in Brandon's circles. His once confident demeanor gave way to nervous glances and tense phone conversations. One afternoon, as I was leaving a client meeting, I ran into Brandon in the lobby of our office. The contrast between us was stark. I stood tall, radiating confidence. Brandon appeared haggard. His expensive suit was rumpled, and his eyes darted around nervously. "Norton!" he spat, his voice full of rage and fear. "What did you do?" I raised an eyebrow, pretending innocence. "I'm not sure what you mean, Brandon. Are you having trouble with your investors?" He moved closer, his voice low and threatening. I know you are behind this. The SEC is looking into these rumors. Do you think you can destroy me? I met his gaze calmly. Destroy you? Brandon, I am not doing anything. If you're having problems, take a look at your own business practices. After all, there is no smoke without fire, right? Brandon's face was contorted with rage. He grabbed my lapel and pulled me close. You arrogant bastard! I will ruin you for this! I calmly removed his hand. My voice is ice cold. I would be cautious if I were you, Brandon. Assaulting a colleague in broad daylight. This is not a good look for a man who is already being scrutinized. As if on cue, several people in the lobby turned and stared at us. Brandon released me. His face flushed with embarrassment and anger. I straightened my jacket and spoke quietly so that only he could hear. You played with fire when you decided to pursue what was mine. Brandon, now you're being burned. And trust me, this is only the beginning. Leaving him sputtering in the lobby, I walked out into the sunlight, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over me. The next stage of our plan was about to begin, and I couldn't wait to see Shelley's reaction as she realized her perfect new life was crumbling around her. That evening, Terrence and I met at our favorite bar, a quiet space where we could talk freely. How did things go with the Carlton today? I inquired, sipping my scotch. Terrence grinned, better than we had hoped. I casually brought up rumors about Brandon's financial problems. Carlton's eyes almost popped out of his head. He's concerned about how it will affect the firm's reputation. I nodded, pleased, good, and Shelley. Terrence replied, She's starting to panic. I overheard her on the phone with Brandon. She's concerned about their lifestyle and asks him about their finances. I leaned back, a cold smile playing across my lips. Perfect. It's time to increase the heat. Call Susan, tell her to release the next batch of information. As we clinked our glasses, I felt a surge of anticipation. Shelley and Brandon's perfect world was about to crumble, and I'd be there to see it burn. The day of the charity gala arrived, and with it, the culmination of our meticulously crafted plan. Tonight, Shelley and Brandon would face the consequences of their actions in the most public setting possible. Are you ready for this? Terrence inquired, appearing in the doorway. I met his gaze in the mirror, my eyes hard and determined. More than ready. Let's go. The Grand Hotel's ballroom was a sea of glittering dresses and expensive suits. As we entered, I felt the weight of eyes on us. Whispers followed in our wake. Brandon's financial troubles had spread like wildfire throughout our social circle, and everyone was waiting to see how the drama would play out. I noticed Shelley across the room, dressed in a form-fitting red gown. Her smile was brittle as she clutched Brandon's arm, her gaze darting nervously around the room. Brandon, for his part, was trying to keep his usual swagger, but I could see the strain on his face. His hand shook slightly as he reached for the champagne flute. Showtime, I murmured to Terrence as I walked towards the stage where the charity auction was scheduled to begin. As I passed Shelley and Brandon, I couldn't resist giving them a small jab. Isn't it a lovely evening? I hope you plan to bid generously, Brandon. After all, it's for a worthy cause. Brandon's face flushed with rage, but before he could react, the MC demanded everyone's attention. I took a position near the front of the crowd. Terrence stood by my side as the auction began. The first few items sold quickly with polite applause after each purchase. The MC then announced the next lot. Ladies and gentlemen, our next item is a weekend getaway to the exclusive Sunset Resort. We will start bidding at $5,000. I raised my paddle, my voice ringing clear throughout the room. 10,000. A murmur spread through the crowd. Brandon, unable to ignore the challenge, called out, 15,000. I smiled, keeping my voice calm. 20,000. The bidding continued, with Brandon becoming increasingly agitated with each race. I could see Shelley tugging on his sleeve and whispering urgently in his ear, but he brushed her off. 50,000, Brandon called with a strained voice. I paused for a moment, allowing the tension to build. Then I gave a casual flick of my wrist. I raised my paddle, $100,000. The room went silent. Brandon's face had turned pale. His jaw worked as he struggled to come up with a response. Shelley's eyes were wide with panic. The MC, sensing the drama unfolding, quickly lowered the gavel. Sold to Mr. Norton for $100,000. Applause broke out. I made my way to the stage to finish the transaction. As I passed Brandon and Shelley, I couldn't help but twist the knife. "Do not worry," I said softly. "I am confident you will be able to afford a nice weekend away soon. Maybe somewhere more affordable." Shelley's face was contorted with rage. "You bastard!" she hissed. "What did you do?" I raised an eyebrow, speaking quietly enough for them to hear me. "I have not done anything. I'm just a concerned citizen donating to charity. It is not my fault if some people are unable to keep up." Before they could respond, I proceeded to the stage and handed over my credit card. I noticed Carlton Bolton watching the scene unfold. His expression was a combination of shock and growing understanding. The rest of the evening was a blur of whispers and sidelong glances. Brandon and Shelley tried to remain calm, but I could see them crumbling under the pressure of scrutiny and speculation. As the gala ended, Carlton cornered me near the bar. "Raymond," he spoke quietly and seriously. "What's happening? There are rumors about Brandon, and now this display. Are you behind all of this?" I met his gaze steadily. "Carlton, I am just a man trying to rebuild his life after a devastating betrayal. If certain truths are revealed, that's not really my fault, is it?" Carlton gave me a long look before slowly nodding. "I see. I hope you understand what you're doing, Raymond. These games may be dangerous." I smiled and raised my glass in a mock toast. "Oh, Carlton, I know exactly what I'm doing, and I'm only getting started." As I left the gala that night, I noticed Shelley and Brandon having a heated argument near the valet stand. Their voices carried through the quiet night air. "What are we planning to do?" Shelley demanded, her voice filled with panic. "Brandon is well known to everyone. We are ruined." Brandon grabbed her arm, his expression twisted with rage. "Shut up! Simply shut up and let me think!" I watched Shelley yank her arm free, tears streaming down her cheeks. "This is entirely your fault. You promised me everything, but now we have nothing." As their argument became heated, drawing the attention of nearby guests, I slipped into my car. The seeds of doubt and discord we had planted were bearing fruit, and I was excited to see how they would develop further. The morning after the gala, I sat in my office, reviewing the aftermath of the previous night's events. Brandon's financial troubles, as well as the spectacle at the auction, had spread like wildfire through our social and business circles. As I scrolled through the flood of emails and text messages, I gave myself a small smile of satisfaction. A knock on the door broke my reverie. "Come inside," I called, expecting to see Terrence or one of my teammates. A man I didn't recognize entered the room, his piercing blue eyes scanning the surroundings before settling on me. He was tall, with a lean build and a face that reflected hard years and difficult decisions. "Raymond Norton?" he asked. His voice is gravelly and low. I immediately raised my guard. "Yes, and you're the man." Close the door behind him and turn to face me fully. "My name is John Reeves, and I believe we share a common enemy." My mind raced, attempting to recall the name. Then it struck me. Shelley's ex-lover, John Reeves, whom she claimed had died. John Reeves. I spoke slowly, carefully observing him. "Last I heard, you were supposed to be at the bottom of the Pacific." John smiled grimly. "The reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, as they say. May I sit? We have a lot to talk about." I motioned toward the chair across from my desk. My mind is filled with possibilities. I'm curious to hear what a dead man has to say. John sat in the chair, his posture relaxed but alert. "I've been watching you, Raymond. Your small campaign against Shelley and Brandon. I have to say I am impressed. And why would my actions be of interest to a supposed dead man?" I asked, leaning back in my seat. John's eyes hardened because Shelley and Brandon didn't simply betray you, Raymond. They attempted to kill me. My eyebrows rose. "That's quite the accusation, Mr. Reeves. Have you got proof?" John reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive. "More than proof. I have evidence to bury them both. Financial documents, emails, and even a recorded conversation about how to deal with me." He placed the drive on my desk and never looked away. "I've been taking my time collecting information. But after seeing what you were doing, I realized we could help each other." I picked up the drive and turned it over in my hands. "And why should I trust you? For all I know, this could be a trap." John leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Because I want to see them suffer just as much as you do. They took everything from me, my business, my reputation, and nearly my life. I've spent the last 2 years plotting my revenge using your resources and my information. We can completely destroy them. I studied John for a long time, considering my options. Eventually, I nodded. Okay, Mr. Reeves. Let's say I'm interested. What exactly are you proposing? John's face lit up with a predatory smile. I propose that we finish what you started. We use my evidence not only to financially ruin them, but also to put them behind bars, attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. We have enough to store them for decades. I experienced a surge of excitement at the possibilities, but caution kept me back. What's in it for you besides revenge? John's expression became grim. Justice, Mr. Norton, and the opportunity to reclaim my life once they are exposed. I can come out of hiding, clear my name. I nodded slowly. My mind is already racing with potential plans. Of course, I will need to verify your information and discuss it with my team. Of course. John agreed. Standing. Take your time, but not for too long. Shelley and Brandon are desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. John left my office. I sat back and stared at the USB drive. This unexpected development may have far-reaching consequences. I reached for my phone and dialed Terrence's number. Terrence, bring the team together. We have a new player in the game, Terrence responded with a sharp, curious tone. What is going on, Ray? I will explain everything once everyone has arrived. Please get them to me as soon as possible. An hour later, my living room was filled with my team's tense energy. Terrence paced by the window, and Susan sat on the edge of the couch, her laptop open and ready. Luther lounged in an armchair. His eyes were shrewd as they tracked my movements. All right, Ray, Terrence said, breaking the silence. What is this all about? I took a deep breath before launching into an account of John's visit and his startling revelations. As I spoke, I carefully observed their reactions. Terrence. His eyes widened in disbelief as Susan's fingers flew over her keyboard, no doubt already digging into John's past. Luther remained impassive, but I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes, so I concluded while holding up the USB drive. We have a potential goldmine of information here, but we must verify it before making any decisions. Susan held out her hand. Give it here. I will run it through every security check I have before we even consider plugging it in. I nodded and tossed her the drive. Good. Luther, I want you to look into John's background and confirm his story. Find out what he's been up to the last 2 years. Luther grunted in agreement and took out his phone. And me? Terrence asked, his voice tight with anticipation. I met his gaze steadily. I need you to keep an eye on Shelley and Brandon following last night. They are bound to make moves. I want to know about every conversation, meeting, and panicked phone call as my team gets to work. I experienced a surge of energy. This new development could be the key to destroying Shelley and Brandon permanently. But a small voice in the back of my mind whispered caution. Could we trust John? Or were we falling into a trap of our own making? Days passed in a flurry of activity as we worked to verify John's information and incorporate it into our plans. The evidence he presented included damning emails discussing how to deal with John, financial records demonstrating the systematic training of his accounts, and even a recorded conversation in which Shelley and Brandon laughed about John's unfortunate accident. We were about to make our move when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered Mr. Norton with a frown. A distorted voice crackled from the speaker. I have some important information about John Reeves. I felt my blood turn cold. Who is this? A friend, the voice responded. Someone who doesn't want you to fall into a trap. Check your inbox. You'll discover that John isn't the ally you believe he is. Hands shook as the line went dead. I opened my email and discovered a single message with an audio file attached. When I pressed play, John's voice filled the room. We'll move once Norton has taken care of Shelley and Brandon. John claimed he'd done all the heavy lifting. We just swooped in, take the evidence and turn it to our advantage. Norton takes the fall, and we walk away with everything. I sat back, my mind reeling. We had been played. John had used us, counting on our desire for vengeance to handle his dirty work. But he had underestimated me. I called an emergency meeting to lay out what I had discovered. The team was shocked, but they quickly rallied. What is your plan, Ray? Terrence inquired. His voice hardened with determination. A slow smile appeared on my face. We give John exactly what he wants before reversing the situation. Over the next few days, we will set our trap. We leaked information, making it appear as if our plan against Shelley and Brandon was coming together. We were constantly building a case against John, relying on his own evidence. The night of the supposed takedown arrived, and I met John in a dimly lit parking garage, my heart racing with anticipation. "Is it finished?" John asked. His eyes gleamed with triumph. I nodded and handed him a file. "It is all here. Everything we know about Shelley and Brandon. They've finished." John grinned as he flipped through the pages. "Excellent work, Norton. I knew you had the potential." "Just one thing, John." I spoke, my voice deceptively calm. "Did you really believe I wouldn't find out about your little plan?" John's head snapped up, with confusion and fear flashing across his face. "What exactly are you talking about?" I took out my phone and played a recording of his betrayal. John's face drained of color as he listened to his own voice describe his plan. "You see, John," I said, advancing on him, "you made a critical mistake. You assumed I was motivated solely by vengeance, but I am smarter than that. I always have a backup plan." Sirens wailed in the distance. As they got closer, John's eyes darted around, looking for a way out. "It is over." "John," I said, my voice harsh, "the authorities own everything. You are plotting against me. Your involvement with Shelley and Brandon's schemes, are you going down with them?" The police cars screeched into the garage. John took a desperate lunge at me. I sidestepped easily, watching as officers tackled him to the ground. Raymond Norton, the detective, approached me. "We will need your statement." I nodded, a grim satisfaction washing over me. "Of course, Detective, I am delighted to cooperate fully." The weeks following John's arrest were a blur of legal proceedings and media frenzy. Shelley and Brandon were arrested in a dawn raid that made front-page news after being implicated by the evidence John provided. I'll never forget seeing them led away in handcuffs, their perfectly crafted facades crumbling. As the dust settled, I found myself in my office looking out at the city skyline. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come inside," I called, and Elizabeth entered with a tentative smile on her face. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, shutting the door behind her. "I just wanted to see how you were doing." I motioned for her to sit. I felt warm for the first time in years. "Not at all." "It's nice to see you, Elizabeth. We talked for hours about the case and the future, about everything and nothing." As the sun set, the sky turned a brilliant orange and pink. I came to a profound realization. The anger and bitterness that had driven me for so long had vanished, replaced by a sense of calm and possibility. "Elizabeth," I said, meeting her gaze, "would you like to eat dinner with me?" Her smile illuminated the room. "I assumed you would never ask." We left the office together, and I felt lighter than I had in years. The long nightmare had ended, and a new chapter was beginning. Shelley, Brandon, and John would all face justice for their crimes. However, my desire for vengeance no longer defined who I was. I had survived, I had triumphed, and now, with Elizabeth by my side, I was prepared to face whatever the future held. Walking out into the warm evening air, I took a deep breath and savored the feeling of freedom and possibility. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was eager to see where it would lead. Here is the next story. My newlywed wife cheated on me, and I am beyond hurt. I'm not sure what flair to put because I never expected to have to post here. My wife is 21 years old and I am 22. We married young because we both felt there was no reason to wait and wanted to spend our lives together. We've only been married for 2 months. For reference, we both work at the same place. I usually close and she opens, but we take 2 days off each week. Last night I noticed she appeared upset. She was guilty of something and I had to coax her out of it. What happened? A guy she had slept with frequently before we started dating was about to relocate from our city. He invited her out to lunch one last time, and she pretended he was one of her first friends when she moved here. So I didn't think much of it and told her to stay safe. That Monday, I went into clothes, and she got off work and joined him for a smoothie. Apparently, he invited her to his apartment one last time for memories. They ended up kissing and having sex. She claimed he initiated it, and subsequent encounters. She never mentioned the mistake. And then, while I was closed again on Tuesday, she returned to his place and they repeated the process. Everything for the second time. Again, she didn't tell me. We work opposite shifts from Wednesday to Friday, but have Thursday off to hang out. She never mentioned her lunch, so I had to ask her about it. She lied, claiming they only had smoothies and talked for 2.5 hours Saturday, while I'm closing again. She returned to his apartment a third time and cheated again. This day at work was terrible for me, so I texted her that I needed a hug when I got home. Unbeknownst to me, she was sucking another man's penis. Not. But for hours before, we talked about what she did. She said she didn't think it was an error. She felt guilty, but not regretful, and she went on to say that if he hadn't moved away, she would have done it even more and had no intention of telling me about it. She said so much more, including reasons why she believes sex with him is better than with me, and she even deleted chats she had with him when I left the room for a moment. I caught her while she was closing Snapchat. She claims she loved him throughout our relationship and even inquired about my thoughts on an open marriage, which we both discussed and agreed would never happen if we married. On her phone, she was texting her cousin about, "Look at how adorable this man is. I'm literally rethinking my marriage over him and looking into why I want a divorce. What happens after 2 months?" She had even looked into jobs and apartments in the town where he had moved. After 2 months, she had a complete plan for her exit. Why did she marry me? Update. First and foremost, thank you for all of your comments. I am overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, and I just wanted to let everyone know that I have already moved out. She owned the apartment where we lived. I'm considering an annulment, and I removed her influence on me when I moved out. I took most of my belongings with me. My brother, who still lives in the city and works for a moving company, will receive the larger items. Of course, I see the mistake of marrying so young. Hindsight is 20/20ths, but this event caught everyone off guard. I'm seeing a therapist and surrounded by people who care about me. I know I will get through this. Thank you, everyone. When we're looking for nostalgia, we usually look through a photo album or make excuses about not regretting it but feeling guilty. Classic. That's like saying, "I'm sorry I got caught." You expressed it yourself. Hindsight is 20/20ths, and you now realize the mistake of marrying someone whose loyalty is about as strong as tissue paper. I posted on here about a week ago about my newlywed wife who cheated on me 3 times, rather than being honest with me. She tried to get me to lower my personal value so much. As you enter into an open marriage with her and her fair partner, I have left her. I'm currently living with my parents, and my only contact with her is to tell her which divorce papers she needs to sign. But I continue to have dreams about threesomes and orgies. They are disgusting because I would never participate in them. In my opinion, it is not something with which I am particularly comfortable. Sex is intended to be personal, loving, and intimate between 2 people. My soon-to-be ex-wife has appeared in each dream. They wake me up in the middle of the night, and I have to spend 5 to 10 minutes just breathing to convince myself it was all a dream. Has anyone else experienced this? Is this simply a result of the trauma she left me with? I plan to bring this up with my therapist the next time we talk. I am wondering if anyone has any advice. Thanks. One quick tip from the community. You are supporting a severe case of PTSD caused by betrayal and trauma. It's time to seek treatment. If you haven't already, talk to your doctor. Begin an exercise routine at your local gym. Consistent exercise is the most effective treatment for anxiety, depression, and trauma-related stress. OP, PTSD is wild. Who knew that being duped came with a free pass to a mental carnival of unwanted threesomes and orgies? Your brain is throwing you the worst bachelor party ever, complete with everything you'd never want to see, attending or leaving with a bang, literally. Who would call? I'm bringing this up with your therapist. In the meantime, consider changing your nighttime routine. A little meditation and a nice cup of chamomile tea. Do you have a similar story? Have you ever had wild dreams following a breakup? Please share your experience in the comments below. Next, Opie's father returns for a small family reunion and an organ donation. My father abandoned his family, only for us to discover later that he cheated. Growing up, I had no idea my sperm donor cheated on my mother. She did not know either. He abandoned my mother and siblings when I was 5 years old, and we hadn't heard from him in more than 30 years. Over the last 5 years, we've learned more than we ever wanted to know. He has 3 other children. One is 6 months younger than I. Another is 1.5 years younger than me, and the youngest is 3 years younger. All of them conceived while he was still married to my mother. It felt like someone had hit me in the chest with a large bag of bricks. He has moved past any wrongdoings and wants to be a part of my grandchildren's lives. I'm an adult with a husband and children of my own, and the adult in me says, "Wow, this guy is an absolute a-hole." But the child in me is crying in agony, wondering why I was not good enough. What did I ever do to drive you away and never look back? I remember you holding me and telling me how much you loved me and how I was and always will be your princess. Was all that a lie? I have a wonderful husband who has been so supportive and held me when I have random breakdowns or feel like I'm a bad mother because I'm just like my father. I have random moments when I feel like I'm not good enough and never will be. And while he tells me I'm the best thing that ever happened to him and the best mother our children could ask for, he's just saying it again. I don't feel that way. Despite the fact that I've known him for a long time, he still makes me feel inferior, and I don't know him. It's one thing to grow up knowing your father is a deadbeat. It's another revelation that he's not only a selfish deadbeat, but a cheating, selfish deadbeat with no self-awareness about how he destroyed his children and wife he claimed to love. I'm trying really hard to let go of this, but it's not as easy as it appears. I just want to add that we all found out about the other kids 5 years ago because my sperm donor had a come-to-Jesus moment, prompting one of them to contact us, so we can all be one family. My brother contacted me on Facebook to let me know what was going on. I was the only one he could find, as my other siblings do not use social media. I declined and told him not to contact me again because I had no desire to speak with my father. My father arrived at my door 2 days ago, eager to meet my children, having recovered from what had occurred. Why can't we? For context, I am the only sibling among the siblings I was raised with who has only children. My children are aware of why I did not have a father and do not want anything to do with them. Wow. Hi. From the ghost of deadbeats past. Can I play Grandpa now? Get real. However, your husband sounds like a real gem, a true MVP in the midst of chaos. Remember that while DNA may have given you a bad father, it does not define your worth or ability to be an excellent parent. You clearly defied expectations and raised a loving family despite everything. Update. I just wanted to thank everyone for their kind words and support. It means so much to me. I'm already in individual and couples counseling, not for marital issues, but because my husband and I have both experienced major traumas, and we've done this for so long that it's helped us communicate better and in a safe environment. I discovered that my sperm donor only reached out because one of the children he raised requires an organ. He assumed the quickest way in was through me and my children. I've contacted a relative who is an attorney and will issue them a cease and desist letter. If they continue, I will seek a restraining order. My attorney also stated that if they don't stop, he will notify the Attorney General about my sperm donor's whereabouts, as he still owes over $90,000 in back child support. Hopefully, the threat of jail and having a clean place on all of his wages will persuade him and his family to back down. I assumed from the community that your story was very similar to my wife's. I could simply tell you my interpretation of what I observed with her. First and foremost, my parents were always as nice to me as they could be, and I had a strong desire to help my wife reconcile with her two parents in any way I could. I now consider this a mistake. They were incapable of change. It just kept hurting her. In the 31 years I've known my wife, I'd only seen her father about 5 times. If I recall correctly, he would notify her every time he was coming to visit. I could see hope in her eyes, that this was the moment he would show her how much he loved her. It never occurred. It was awkward, at best, and lacked affection. And then he was back with his real family, his 3 stepdaughters, who had always been more important to him than his own 2 daughters. When she finally gave up on trying to have a relationship with him, I believe it was a huge relief for her. Her stepmother recently called to tell her he was dying. She wished her the best, and that was it. Did not cry. Nothing. I'm not saying that going no contact is the best option here, but don't be afraid to consider it. Finally, what about the grandchildren? You may think it would be cruel not to include their grandfather in their lives. What I saw was that the grandchildren could tell my wife and her father were uncomfortable with each other, so of course they will be uncomfortable around the stranger. It's unlikely he'll be able to form a genuine relationship with them unless he's willing to put in the effort to repair his relationship with you. Best wishes, and I am sorry you are going through this. It's heartwarming to see you and your husband supporting each other during this matchup, and kudos to you for going legal on him. While he's at it, maybe you should ask your lawyer to draft a clause that says you shouldn't contact me for body parts. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, leave a comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Take care.